Gee, this is you, Paul, is it? Big time. Yeah. Item 9. Approved by, so it is. Okay, councillors, if we can call the meeting to order, please. I'm missing some people, bad luck. Item 9, Paul, this is your paper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Let's
get moved into was quite a lot of paper, but it always is an annual, a draft annual plan at this stage does generate an awful lot of paper. But what we have before you are the supporting accountability documents, which we'll take you through in a minute, and of course the consultation document in its fine form. I allude here to a little bit about the Local Government Act and process, which you've no doubt read if you wanted to do that. I've got down here, recalled the workshops. There's been a number of workshops that Council has worked through in order to get to where they have today, 23rd of February and again in 2 in March, 8th and 15th of March. And at those workshops there was discussion of a 1 million environmental kickstart fund, which is reflected in these funding is reflected in these papers and in the consultation document. The annual plan shows a break-even position from an operating perspective, which is always good to have. I think it's 12,000 surplus, so that's basically a break-even position. Consultation document, like it needs to under the Local Government Act, will set out options. And the options there, as you're aware, are no rate increase, or the next step up is to have a rate increase of 4.88% to fund business as usual, but not the Kickstart program. And then the final resolution on rates there is 9.88%, and that's the one in the consultation document in order to fund the $1 million environmental Kickstart program. There's some changes to the resource management charges that you might like to come back to, and Ian will pick up on any of those issues if you've got any questions. The papers you've got today under attachment 1, which is the big fat one here, all the financial information. You've got the funding impact statement, which is all your rate setting. You've got sheets in there, sample rates for specific properties. Now you've seen those in your workshops. You've got groups of activities, which is your KPIs. A lot of those come out late. Leanne's been struggling to get those out. There's always a lot of paper there, but I believe you've got them all now, and apologise for that. Some of them have gone out a little bit later than we'd have deemed desirable. And of course the consultation document, which is the colour presentation document, appended to here, and it's looking pretty sharp. Timetable, just to pick it up there, public submissions timetable for that, when Council will meet to hear the public submissions to this plan, which is in June, Monday and Tuesday, 12th and 13th of June, so it's middle of June. By the end of June, adoption of the final plan. Now, Mr. Chairman, the recommendations here, which we'll go through at pace to have 2 rates resolutions, so as they can be taken separately if you decide to do that. It's the way it's been structured. The adoption of the accountability documents, and then the resource management charges, and finally the consultation document, and that's the order that things must be done. The consultation document's always last. So, Mr. Chairman, enough from me. Any questions?
This is the core of what we do. Any questions?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, oh sorry, Neil.
Paul, I'm not clear who the best person to refer to in regards to the service levels and performance targets. Where does that sit?
Well, been coordinated by Leanne, but the best people to ask are those that actually put it together, which is the group manager that is responsible for.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I wonder if I could, I've got a few notes, Mr Chair, if you indulge me to work my way through those of the respective managers. Would that be to your liking?
Yep.
Can I, a comment to start. I think you've heard this from me like a stuck record, is around the measurability of our targets, etc. And I'm just hoping that we can look forward this time next year to a substantially reformed planning tool and an opportunity to have our outputs, outcomes, etc. expressed in a measurable way. And I just want to take a few examples if I could. And I start at the beginning as number one, and that is the economic development activity. Which manager is responsible for that?
That's me, Councillor.
Thank you, James. My comment here is, if we look at activity one, level of service, regional economic development strategy mission statement, to make Hawke's Bay the best location in which to visit, work, invest, live and grow, we've got 4 outputs there that you've included. The comment I've made myself is that essentially they're saying we're going to spend some money on tourism promotion and we're going to write some action plans. I'm wanting to see in the future, if it can't be done in regard to this plan, is that we include actual measurables. So that if we're going to invest under our LOSM 1, we ought to be seeing the increase in visitor numbers coming forward from that investment. And then those other ones, I would be suggesting that, for example, the economic development strategy, if we're saying that we're making this investment, and we are, what are the outcomes that we expect for the economy? What growth do we expect to occur as a result of this? So we're needing to put our hand up to some measurables that we can say, did we get there or if we didn't? And so that's that general comment on that one. I don't know if there's room to introduce some measures that's...
Chair, if I could comment. So the sorry, Councillor.
Which page, which attachment?
Oh, sorry, that's...
Attachment 3.
Attachment 3, page 3.
Page 2, actually.
Page 2.
Chair, the Council received a paper late last year in relation to the refresh of the strategic plan, which the intention was to lay the foundation for the long-term plan. In that paper, it was explicitly noted that the current long-term plan is very high on outputs and very low on outcomes. It is very low on measurables as well. This has been noted, and it was proposed, and in our workshop discussion suggested that we will significantly rationalise the number of granular output measures in our upcoming long-term plan, and we will anchor more heavily the long-term plan to measurable outcomes. So that is what the Council has raised is quite correct. It's been noted. We happen to have a staff member on board who will be running the long-term plan process that has done precisely this for another regional council, where she was able to take the number of required actions down by about 70% and link more heavily the long-term plan to specific real-world outcomes. There is a tendency when these processes are done bottom-up for them to be very activity-driven, because understandably staff within the organisation focus on what they do every day and what they deliver. It becomes therefore a leadership function to aggregate those and articulate them as outcomes and connect them to outcomes, which is effectively a function of strategy, and that's something we'll pick up in the refresh of the strategic plan and drag through into the LTP. So in answer to what you have before you is very much on rails from the existing LTP.
Get that fully, and thank you for that, and very heartened to hear a new direction of travel with regard to that. The question I've got, though, is it possible, or I'm quite happy to accept whatever the answer is here, is it possible to insert some measures in this current plan, or you're thinking, let's not bother, let's just wait for next year? What's the best advice you've got on that?
In strict terms, the performance of the council is measured, including by our auditors, against our long-term plan. And so the required actions that exist in there and the performance targets have been consulted on with the community extensively in the development of the long-term plan, and they are the measures that we're currently holding ourselves against. Therefore, the inclination would be to only make changes as necessary, and that is the guidance that was given to staff for the refresh of this, which is to say if something material has changed that makes the existing performance target no longer relevant, then by all means update it. But in terms of a general improvement in the way in which they've been crafted, that hasn't been undertaken through this process specifically. And at this point in the process, given that we are already up against the wire in terms of the consultation process, we'd like to do that by exception only, only if it's really required,
Okay.
Councillor.
Totally appreciate your advice. Just one final thing, Mr. Chair.
Before you do that, and I'll come straight back to you, is that we do, with the tourism investment, we do have a very specific KPI
Yes.
that,
No, I
we, that we
appreciate-
measure them against.
I appreciate
So
that,
that one.
Yeah, I appreciate, Mr. Chair, but the point I'm making is that should in fact find its way to here. But yeah, and just one finally, just to, if you like, to emphasise the point I'm making, and if I could ask under land drainage and river control activity 1A, I guess this is you, Mike. We've got there, and this is on page 10 of that spreadsheet document. If we go to activity 1A, and I'm looking at in particular, HBRC will protect and enhance the scheme's riparian land and associated waterways administered for public enjoyment and increased biodiversity. Across in performance target for the LTP, in the middle column, we've got stream ecological values show no decline and or an increase in ecological function, and then we've got increased native plantings as measured 6 yearly based on ecological enhancement plan. Can you tell me what was the current year, or what is the current year's native planting? So what are we going to increase from A to B? Do you know that?
I can't tell you off the top of my head. It's specifically associated with the river corridors, but I can find that out and certainly circulate it by email.
Don't bother.
Yeah.
But the point I'm making is that this document needs to be able to, we need to be able to show regular milestone performance 1 year on year, and therefore we ought to know what we planted last year and what we're going to plant this year, and ask the question, did we get there? And if we do that right throughout our document, we will be able to demonstrate performance.
Yeah, I can understand where you're coming from, and in most years we would get 90% survival rate, but not always. So, we can plant them. How you plant them, how you manage them, how you maintain them is absolutely key to their survival. And so, it's not just a planting measure, if I can make that comment. Yeah.
I hear you.
Yeah.
I think they are very good questions. Setting KPIs like we do on tourism and on riparian plantings would be very interesting to a lot of us, I'm sure. Any other questions? Councillor Bevan?
Thank you, Chair. I'm looking at part 1 of the accountability document, and I'm looking at on page 2, strategic development activities, targeted rates. And each of these tables splits the rates into targeted rates and then general rates, right? So in this particular one, we've got on the right-hand column 2.5 million in target, or 2.3 in targeted rates, and then 2.6 in general rates. Targeted rates are where there are specific elements of the community that gain a particular benefit
That's correct,
from
yeah.
the expenditure,
Yeah,
right?
yes.
And so the rates are split partly between those who are the beneficiaries and partly as a general rate, and the percentages change quite a lot depending on the type of activity it is. I was quite interested to see 2.3 million as targeted rates. So who are the beneficiaries of the?
Well, that's the economic development rate that goes into economic development and tourism, specifically tourism.
So perhaps I can just clarify. So this is not geographically targeted. This is effectively hypothecated, which is to say it is levied for a particular purpose. So I believe it's uniformly levied across the region, but it's dedicated for that function, or I might have that wrong.
Well, 30% of the rate goes to commercial, based on capital value, and there's a uniform annual charge for rural and urban. Yeah, that's 70%.
And that's described as a targeted charge.
Yes, yeah, it's a targeted
Even
uniform
though it's not
charge.
actually targeted at all, it's across the entire urban population, for instance.
Well, it's targeted. The uniform charge is targeted to rural and urban, and the rate set on capital value is targeted to commercial. That's how you get your targeted.
Yeah, but my point is, it's not actually it's a completely untargeted rate in my view, because it's everyone's paying the same or whatever.
Well, no, they're not, because the commercial is paying a completely different basis and paying considerably more. So a lot of this rate is targeted to those that council believe benefited from this activity, which is commercial, and the remainder is picked up through a uniform charge.
Right.
Can I just ask a quick, following on from that question, Chair? Paul, does that mean that particular targeted rate is a separate line in our rates bill that says targeted for business economic activity?
Yes, that is.
Okay, so if I could just carry on page 5. We've got a target of getting the Mohaka plan done by the end of this year. Is that a realistic target?
Notification.
Absolutely not. So that's been overlooked. At the time that this was being drafted, which would be going back a month or so back, there was certainly the intent to carry on, and a decision has been taken in the intervening period to slow down. That date definitely needs to change, so we will amend that.
Okay, so perhaps you could
and
have
I'd probably push it out a year to December 2018.
Right, okay. Yeah, because I imagine that huge amount of resources are going into the tank process at the moment.
Can we notify it under that timetable, or is that we couldn't even do that?
No, look, we could draft a plan change in that time frame, but what we couldn't do is carry the community with us. So the need to develop it consultatively with the community, I think, precludes our ability to get it done by the end of the year.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. I have a couple of issues I'd like to have a look at. So if we go, well, just generically, I'm on the plan change 6, and I'm in report governance, community engagement and services, page 12, and I'm just wondering, I've just flagged it with Mike, but maybe Ian, we're actively engaging with stakeholders, but I can't see any required actions that actually link to the actual target, and along the same vein with strategic development, land drainage and river control, page 6, we will ensure resource management plans are implemented, monitored and evaluated, but all I'm seeing is reporting. And yeah, so I guess I'm getting back to the discussion I had with you during morning tea, Ian, and some of the challenges we're having around attracting land management staff how are we going to go there in hitting these targets when it's so difficult to attract skilled and qualified staff?
So just reflecting first on your comment around the required actions, I do note that certainly the first one and the third and the fourth involve engagement with the primary sector and tangata whenua in relation to the catchment, and it's certainly the intent that engagement is part of the implementation process and is critical for successful implementation. We have to have people engaged in understanding their requirements to achieve them.
Challenging when we are struggling with staff.
It is absolutely challenging in as much that this all hinges on having the right capability and capacity within what's called land management at the moment to deliver or implement the stuff on farm, and we know that it is challenging to find and recruit people into councils to do that work, and this isn't a Hawke's Bay, this isn't unique to Hawke's Bay, this is a national challenge. And there's nothing within this document that refers to that particular challenge other than it's the intent of the executive is part of this implementation process, is to undertake quite a fundamental, belts and braces review of our approach to this area of our work, sufficient to bring you greater clarity and certainty around what we need to do or how we're going to put ourselves together for the long-term plan, to deal with not only the issues of what we actually need to do in these catchments, but also things like not only our own internal capability and capacity, but capacity in the sector generally to support it, because we won't be doing all of the stuff, and a lot of it sits with, for example, farm planners, of which there's not many in New Zealand. So how are we going to deal with that issue is absolutely something that will be much more a focus in the long-term plan.
Okay. And along the same lines with having challenges to attract the right staff, if we are to throw another $1 million at environmental work, are you confident that we can get the staff in place, qualified staff, to be achieving outcomes in those areas? Or are we going to have the money and then we'll be rating for something we won't be able to deliver on due to lack of capability?
Very good question, and something I'm particularly mindful of, that we have to have people to deliver this work. That's probably less of a challenge for us, because what we're largely talking about in many of these areas is project managing contractors for a lot of the work. So it's probably going to be much more a project management skill base we're looking for than necessarily what I would call influencers, the land management people who are on farm talking to farmers and making change. Because a lot of the work that's proposed in these catchments that we're looking to build these projects around are much more about physical works and interventions, as much as it is about influencing behaviour change. But certainly something very mindful of. It's no good having the money in the bank and nobody there to see it spent properly.
Can I just add? Sorry, just as a bit of background information, we have recently employed an additional, well, not an additional staff member, a replacement staff member to the land management team. She starts in a couple of weeks. She had 2 referees that she discussed the position with before she put in her application, and both said, if you're going to Hawke's Bay Regional Council, yes, we strongly recommend you do. But should it be any other regional council, we would recommend you don't. Now, the reason is that Hawke's Bay Regional Council is seen as leading the way, and being very proactive, working with the farming sector at the moment. And so just something to keep in the back of your mind, that is how Hawke's Bay Regional Council is perceived at the moment. Certainly we don't want to change that if we are seeking additional recruits over the coming years. So just something that is useful awareness.
Thank you, Mr. Adey. That is wonderful news to hear, and I'm sure that is correct. Just to answer your question, Councillor, we've thrashed these items out over in workshops. We counselled our staff for advice on what we could achieve and what they needed, and in fact they came back to us and said, this is what we need to achieve your objectives. So I think they understand what the objectives are and what it's going to take to get there.
Thank you, Chair. I'm now on to performance measures part 2, page 12. And this is a similar question to what I asked before, Paul, so I imagine I should address it to you. This is transport, and there is a targeted rate to support transport of 1.6 million. Is that the same thing? You call it a targeted rate, but in fact it's a general rate across all urban dwellings?
No, Councillor, it's targeted to those that are able to access public transport, and Liz would probably have it better than I. It's within a radius, isn't it?
So it's in the, through you, Mr Chair, it's in the Napier and Hastings urban areas. It's
okay.
targeted to those where we provide public bus services, and by and large to those areas where there's taxi services available for total mobility scheme, and they coincide.
Okay, and I actually had a question about that. So total mobility is mentioned actually on the last page of that particular report on page 16. Do we support total mobility entirely by ourselves, or do the TLAs contribute?
No, it's joint funding between ourselves and NZTA. They provide the subsidy funding.
So how did that come about? Why don't the TLAs contribute to this?
It's a part of the public passenger transport portfolio, if you like, which has been given to regional councils, and all but one regional council in New Zealand operate it. The exception is Southland, where it's solely operated by Invercargill City Council, but in the remainder of New Zealand it's run by obviously unitary or regional councils.
Thank you, Chair. Attachment 5, page 22 or 23, depending. The 600,000 loan provision for open space community facilities to provide for new opportunities. So none of that money was used for Waipariki, obviously. It came from elsewhere. Okay. How do we? I mean, there's a few opportunities to the north for open spaces, certainly at Mahia, etc. How do we initiate that conversation?
You agreed to a schedule of improvement work within existing open spaces sometime 12 months ago, and that really took up all of the...
You're going to spend it, in other words, Mike?
It's already committed, Councillor.
Mr Chair, you've dealt with the summary document yet? Is that is the one-page spreadsheet? Is that for consideration now?
Yeah. Just going to attachment 3, page 4, LOSM 8. It notes HBRC will integrate land and water and biodiversity management. I know in this document here we've got something about biodiversity in there, but can someone just point me to the line that's in, or the page that's on in the financial information where I can see that coming through? Because I know in some of the reports you give on expenditure, Paul, you have a biodiversity line which is normally 0. Or am I looking?
Councillor, if you go to attachment 4 part, which is the next attachment, that's headed biosecurity and biodiversity.
Yep, that's right. Attachment 4. Oh, God.
Sorry,
That's
confusing.
As long as it's in there, that's fine. That's all. Yep. I'll find it. I've answered that question. The attachment 3, page 6, LOSM 12. This is about the resource management plans again. I see that we're due to get an annual report on the implementation for the Tukituki Plan Change 6. Is that a requirement under Plan Change 6 that it's annual, or can we have that more frequently, or is there a resourcing issue or something why we can't do that? Because I think as time goes by, again, it's going to be something that the public are going to become more conscious of as to how we're going with the implementation of Plan Change 6.
My recollection is it's a requirement of the policy for an annual report. I mean, we can report as frequently as you desire, but obviously there's a bit of work involved in production of these reports, and typically the sort of work that we're doing isn't changing significantly. You know, the difference between a year and 6 months isn't significant, and it's probably, I would suggest to you that an annual report is about an appropriate frequency, at least at the outset, because there are, starting from 2018 in particular, there are a number of triggers that the policy requires in terms of meeting limits and or consenting requirements and or changes in allocation and flows that start to come in play that we can report against.
Okay, that's cool. And there was one other question I had. Track it down. Again, attachment 3, page 17, LOSM 63. You've got proposed 2017 action, required actions. Record and report, this is the 1, 2, 3, the third paragraph. Record and report percentage of monitoring inspections and appropriate follow-up recorded and reported. When are they generally reported back to council, or are they reported to council?
Yeah, we do have an annual operational report and then operational plan for both our compliance section and our consent section that has typically gone to E&S in August from memory, where those sorts of measures are reported against.
Okay, cool. I can look forward to it then. That's fine.
I'm on now, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I just wondered if we could go to the one-page summary, if you like, of the proposal, and I just wanted to, and I've spoken to Mr. Palmer about this. We seem to have just missed out from the workshop the marine environment scenario, and we've got in there biodiversity. And from my perspective, I think that biodiversity is much more generic, and that the item that meant to be in 6 was, the 6th item was in fact the marine environment issue. And I wondered whether I had spoken to James about producing another document that looks like that. Is it possible to table that at this stage, or?
Yes, Drew's got them behind you, so
Okay.
ready to go.
So,
You got one?
yeah, I've got that one. Yeah. So the suggestion I'm making is in fact that we move marine from the right-hand quadrant down to be the 6th item, and you can see that in the diagram being circulated. Yes, the one in our paper has biodiversity as number 6, and I think that's been transposed somehow. So biodiversity goes up to the right, and marine comes down to the left. So it's item number 6, and then in addition to that, the commentary under the broad heading on the left, time to clean up, with a little girl there, that's substituted for a comment which was made in the the strategic plan. So there's a substitution of statement there, and I've got one further suggestion. sorry. Well, the one in our original, the paper in the agenda talks about is years. So it's trying to capture, yes. So that the new one recently distributed has my suggestion to include the statement there as opposed to the one appearing in the paper, the original agenda. And then I've got another suggestion and be interested in feedback. I'm feeling that the commentary just under that in green, our regional economy is booming, etc. I think it doesn't quite hit the note that's required there, in that the whole thing essentially is a call for action that says everything's just fine and lovely. I'd prefer a stronger statement in that space just there, and I've given Leanne the wording I suggest that's there, which is something like water management issues, including the Havelock North drinking water crisis, are a wake-up call for the council. We must take action, something of that nature in that space, as opposed to our regional economy is booming. Are there any thoughts on how we might beef up that?
More powerful, that, you know, we're on a new wave. Not sure that one.
If you look at the last paragraph of this, the bottom line is that many of our rivers, lakes, and streams are in disgrace.
I'd put that in.
some cases getting worse. That's a pretty strong statement.
I'd put that up if you had to put something up. He wants a stronger statement than that, an environmental statement.
But I agree with what Neil's saying, which is that our regional economy is booming, doesn't fit in with the context of the rest of this.
No.
So just perhaps to recap, when we did workshop this with the chair, part of this was recognising that a rating increase is happening in the context of strong economic times.
Well, what would he know?
That's right, but you know, it does say that, and it does link, but and the bottom one, maybe just do the bottom line as a green too, so that it stands out. The bottom line is that our rivers, because that is actually the statement that our community's most concerned about, isn't it? This is about, we need to fix it, and we're asking your help to fix it, to begin the process.
Yeah, I'd be happy with that as a compromise of that first sentence in the last paragraph. We highlighted that, so that drew people's attention to that particular line.
Yes, because it does say, but we also have big challenges in our environment. So our economies are booming, but we have big challenges in our environment. Yeah, I know, and you've canvassed it with me. So I'm open for changes, and perhaps, Drew, we're pushing a message here that, what are your thoughts on the message we're trying to convey? Don't mean to put you on the spot, but just did. Well,
you have a call out over your chest here. You could take the bottom line sentence and make that your call out.
You mean we need to help fix?
Yeah, replace that with the bottom line is that many of our, see what I'm doing?
And leave your handsome body unsullied with words.
Well, yeah, it's covering my stomach though, which is a help. Where do you put that? Because that is a crucial statement, Tom. Where are you going to put that?
Up to the green.
Up to this one?
Yeah.
Okay, I like that too.
Then what do we put there?
We take that out, booming, but we don't, that point, James, do we, I mean, everybody, we had a point there that we would be throwing out.
So I would just swap this sentence, we need your help to fix our rivers, lakes, etc. Make that the first sentence in the last paragraph of your signature. And put the bottom line sentence over your physique.
Which one? Which one? The bottom line. Okay.
Sentence that begins, it's a stronger sentence, and let that be your call out.
It's also longer.
Yeah. Ah, goodness gracious.
Just a question, Chair, just to Mr Maxwell. You know, the bottom line is many of our rivers, I mean, no one will read the many in that. They're going to read our rivers are a disgrace, polluted. Is that accurate? It's not entirely accurate. A large proportion of our rivers are in pretty good shape.
The large proportion of them are, but there are many. I mean, look, it depends on how you categorise many. There are rivers, lakes, and streams that do have problems.
No, they're going to read many. Oh, what are you suggesting here?
Just add too many.
Yeah, too many of our rivers, yeah. I like that. We need help to fix our rivers, streams, lakes, because that's the call out. I'm not sure. Up the very top, you're suggesting? James, what do you think?
You mean in the words in green?
Yeah.
Take the words off Rex's body and put them up to replace the words in green.
Yeah.
That's what I would do as well.
Okay. I think it's a compromise. I'm happy with that. I know James isn't not entirely.
Well, if you're going to increase rates by 9.88%, I think there's important to note the economy is going rather well at the moment. But look, this is look,
It's not going well for everybody. So.
No, it's not. And actually, we did have some wording. I think originally it must have got culled out, drew around it, including the benefits. Where did they go? There was when we worked this up, because we also had workers, orchards, and their workers.
Actually, that was right. Some of that was just edited out
By you, Drew.
Yeah.
I put in workers.
And there was a statement of we need to ensure the benefits are shared by all, or words to that effect. So there has been some editorial license taken on that. But look, have you got enough clarity, Drew, at this point?
So, sorry, there's just one other thing. If we're going to take the words over Rex's body and put them up the top, then the next paragraph that starts, but we also have big challenges, it should just say, we have big challenges in our environment.
Yeah. Why don't Drew and I work on this, because we'll get it right, and we know what the nuances of what you're saying is, if everyone's happy. Yes, yeah, I'm happy.
I'd like to have some input into with the dates. It just kind of isn't reading easily. You've got Havelock North 3 May Community Centre. You should really have 3 May Havelock North Community Centre. You know, same Waipawa. It would be easier if it was clear it was at the Regional Council office in Waipawa, because most of the council meetings are actually in the municipal theatre. So I just don't think that's quite as simple as it should be.
Okay, can you relay those comments to Drew so that when we do sit down, we've got that tidy as well? If everyone's happy with that,
I am. But just where you've got the 6 environmental hotspots, number 3, they're 20 k's apart, but it actually, what you say there only relates to the lake. Whereas with Lake Hatuma and Tukituki, even though they're well apart, it relates to both of them. So that's correct. But I think with number 3, you need to have another sentence there about the river. I know it's supposed to be short, or a shorter one about the lake. Because it doesn't relate, what you say there doesn't relate to the Wairau River at all.
No.
And all those hapu up there, they don't know those fellows at Whakake at all.
They're all related, mate.
Is there people at Whakake? You could take out sediment from where you've got reduced sediment from erosion, which is affecting aquatic life and forget about choking the lake. But perhaps. Just a tweak.
No, it's not, yeah. Drew, have you got all these comments? So you and I might sit down a bit later and just go through them.
One further
Yeah.
question, Chair. Where you've got the three options, is there a statutory requirement that we frame it like that? Yep. Okay, that's fine.
Put a fourth option, leave Hawke's Bay.
Can't be done. Okay, if there are no more questions, we have before us recommendations 1 to 6. Before we go into, everyone want to make a comment on these? Do we have a mover and a seconder? A mover? A seconder? Seconder? Curtin and Belford, move and second. Okay, comments, thoughts? Councillor? You're first, he's second. I'll move it first.
Well, yes. Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this is as part of the agenda, this particular agenda, which is well worth commentary on. What we've set here and out for public consultation is an urgent call, and that's why I was keen to have words that demonstrated that. It's an urgent call to clean up our waterways. Some of the words used include a disgrace, and sure, most of our rivers are in pretty good order, but there are substantial water-related issues that we are facing as we speak. I don't think I've experienced such, and I think crisis is not too strong a word to use, from one end of the region to another. If you go from Central Hawke's Bay with wastewater issues there, non-compliance, contamination of the Tukituki River and other catchments there as a result of wastewater disposal. We've got a calamity, it can only be described as such, a world-renowned calamity in Havelock North with our drinking water, something that should never happen and should never happen again. We've got stormwater issues in Napier, contamination of our prized Ahuriri estuary as a direct result of poor planning, lack of attention, greed on behalf of some of our local authorities. The result is a disaster for the estuary, and that was brought home to bear in the report we received on the estuary late last year. We then move on up our wonderful pristine countryside and we get to Lake Tutera, and what do we see? More woe. We continue on up to Wairoa and the Wairoa River, major issues. We continue on to Waikaremoana and the dam. What have we got? Major issues in regard to what we are doing to our waterways and the quality of water that we have now in front of us today. So this document and the steps that we've outlined in the annual plan going to the public is much, much more than a regular annual plan process. It's a call to action to recognise the issues and that this council is determined to respond. And I'm really pleased that we've settled on an investment strategy, as limited as it is, spending something like $1.2 million, asking the public of Hawke's Bay to recognise the crisis we're in and to agree with us that a substantial rate increase is required to meet these challenges. I'll be interested in the feedback and to hear from the public throughout the region what they think of this and whether they think the public, those that write the cheques and pay the rates, are quite happy to do so in the knowledge that we're going to spend these dollars repairing the damage to our most precious resource.
Yeah, we've acknowledged in this document that we've heard a wake-up call, or we feel there's a call out there to make dramatic improvements in our environment. But I see this as just as much a wake-up call to the ratepayers who have to come to terms with what it takes resource-wise to deal with their expectations about that task. We take the lowest take of any council out of the pocketbooks of ratepayers in Hawke's Bay, and we're asked to carry what I would argue is the most substantial burden, and one that is only going to increase drastically. During the amalgamation debate, a large percentage of Hawke's Bay folks said they wanted a regional council to remain independent of the territorial authorities, and they wanted it to remain independent because they saw it as having the role of being the independent protector of the environment. Well, now it's time to put up the resources behind that statement, behind that rhetoric. If you want us to do the job, we're going to have the resources to do it. We can't fix these issues with a magic wand. So this is just the start of I think, a reassessment of what does it take to provide the quality environment that we think most ratepayers want. And what we hear in our private conversations around the community is that this is what they want, but we're going to have to see now a public reflection of that in support for this plan.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to ask at the beginning if you could take them separately. We've just had a big event in Wairoa National Rodeo Champs, and I spent the day talking to a lot of people and said, what do you think of a 10% rate increase? And don't want a bar of it. So it's going to be interesting, the feedback that comes in. People that say that to me personally need to actually front up and put it in writing, in my view. My issue with it is quite simply we're going to do a development program. There's no guarantees we're going to spend the money we ask for. And there's been no, in my view, I admit we don't have much time because the annual plan is upon us, but there's been no other exploration of where that funding could come from. I do think that the focus is good, and I think that will get huge support in the community. But when we've got it's the same old record, when we've got an average income in Wairoa of just over $10,000, if you spread it out, $20 is $20, and I can't support the extra 5%. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Along the same lines, I'd quite like you to take them separately as well. And as you're all well aware, this is what we are trying to initiate here is commendable. It's aspirational, but in the Tuki catchment where I represent, there is already Plan Change 6 about to be heading down the pipeline, and huge costs that are leading to environmental improvements and enhancements for the local community, which I am supportive of, but to throw an extra 5% on top of what has already been required in the Central Hawke's Bay community is not palatable either, and I will be voting against it.
Thanks, Chair. Just very briefly, I will support the recommendations. We all know we've got a major problem with our waterways, and that we need to invest in them to fix them, and the $1.2 million of extra rates that we're asking the public to pay is only the thin end of the wedge. That's the reality that we're facing here. And I hear what Councillors Hewitt and Wilson are saying about how the public might react to this, and I'm wondering, Chair, if we could also consider when you're doing the minor redesigns of this thing, it only shows the increase for rates at 9.88%, and I'm wondering if you put in the 4.88 as a figure as well, so that people actually see that what we're asking for is not $25, it's actually an extra 10 or 12 or whatever on the long-term plan, so people can actually see what the differences are and how little impact we're actually going to have on what was predicted in the 10-year plan anyway.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to say thank you to the members of the media, especially Sophie, who posted this particular item up on social media last night and got an instant response in terms of feedback, which was really helpful and constructive for my decisions today. In that, it was mostly very positive about the move. There was a lot of concern from people stating that they felt that the polluter should pay first, and when I suggested that it's not just the farmers that are causing this issue, we also have to look at the Ahuriri estuary and the Karamu stream and the oceans, and that's also comes from urban areas. That chatter seemed to quieten down a fair bit. Also, when I mentioned that it was only about 55 cents a week for the average household, we're very, very happy to invest in improving our waterways in Hawke's Bay for that sort of money. So I don't think it's going to be such a hard sell. Based on that feedback, I don't think it's going to be such a hard sell to the members of the public. I think they will get right behind it, and in that respect, I'll be supporting this.
Any other comment?
Just a comment. So the average Joe Bloggs that not too well up with the investment would say to the council, well, you've got $60 million there, why don't you use that? What would your answer to that be?
I mean, we use our capital. Yeah.
Well, they don't understand words like capital. They just understand words like $60 million.
You want me to answer that? I would answer. I'll try and. You're talking about someone who doesn't understand capital. If they ask me that, I would say you have a very good point. But if you ask me someone who does understand capital, I would say that this is not a capital item. This is a working capital item, and it's a very small amount of money that's coming out of every household. And I think Councillor Bevan's point is very clear. The extra is in a place like Flaxmere is $7 a week, and in Wairoa is $7 a week as well in the Wairoa township. A year, $7 a year in the Wairoa township. It's not a great deal of money, and I would also say to them, if you go up the scale, if someone understands about core competence, I would say, and as you're aware, we are reviewing our activities and our investment in other sections of our community, and we expect to make savings, but we can't do that overnight, and we do need to get cracking on fixing up our especially these particular hotspots. So this is a one-off environmental fund, which will flow over though, so it's just over $1 million, which will flow and will always be there to contribute to our environment and especially these hotspots. But we don't, it's not in our intention to ask for this again. We intend to make savings in our business to offset this.
So this chap that does nothing about capital will say, yeah, but bro, you didn't answer my question. It's about the $60 million, bro.
I already did. I say he actually makes a very good point about the $60 million. That is targeted for a particular investment at the moment, which the council is thinking about. I'd reverse the question, Mr. Mohi. What do you think we should do with that $60 million?
I think you should give it back to the Maoris.
there has been a suggestion that we take the items separately. We have a mover and a second to take the whole paper. I haven't had a chance to speak on it except to answer Mr. Mohi's question. I would like to speak, and it is basically along those lines. We need to get going on this, and we need to develop what I refer to as business plans for each one of these 6 hotspots. And our scientists refer to something different, but in the end, it's a business plan. So I have talked to our staff. They think they're capable of doing that within within the funding that's required, so that very shortly we have a plan on each one of these hotspots. This is what we should do. So it's not enough money to do the doing. The doing will have to come out of as we go proceed over the next few years, because this is going to be a very expensive process. It's taken us 150 years to knock the hell out of our environment. It's only taken 25 years to affect our rivers to the degree we've affected our rivers, but it's going to take some investment and energy to turn the clock back. And I think the public will support this. I'm prepared to go out to the public. I would be very happy to go to Wairoa with you, Councillor, and go to your Wairoa show and take it on and I'd be very happy to go to Central Hawke's Bay and argue it there, as I will be to go to Flaxmere or Hastings or Havelock. So if you want a hand in your orahi, I'm getting a Maori lesson over here, then I'm very happy to do that. I know we're asking the public to dip into their pockets, but it's for a very good cause, and we need to get started on this. We cannot let more water under the bridge. I just had a proposal that we take 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6 together, and 3 separately. What is 3? Do you want to do that? We've got a mover and a seconder for where we're going. Do mover and seconder happy that we do that? That we leave, because everybody wants to vote for, I guess. I think we take it as a. We've got a mover and seconder to take.
Seconder, I'm happy to have it divided 1, 2, 4, 5, and vote.
You're a mover? You're the mover? Okay, we'll take the first motion. Will you move 1?
Whether, Mr. Chair, before you come out of debate, could I take up my right to respond? And there are 2 issues that I did want to draw out of the debate that I think need commenting on. The first is that I think there is a very strong determination to make a difference and get on with it. I'm confident that this council wants to do that, and in order to do it we need the money to do so, and I think that's what the public of Hawke's Bay want. The second thing that emerged out of the debate is the discussion about our capital. The debate around the port obviously reflects that, because it's by far and away the largest asset. And I'd make this point that for so much time, over so many years now, we've relied on port dividend and non-rated income to underpin a lot of the work that we do. The consequence of that is that the ratepayer is lulled into a sense of false security about what they're paying for. There is not so much accountability for cheques that are not written by the ratepayer, when in fact they do belong to them. And I think it's vital that we stop doing what we've done for a long time, and that's continue to draw on capital to fund business as usual. And that's a major step that this council needs to communicate to the public, which addresses Mr. Mohi's issue. What are we doing with the 60 million? What are we doing with the port dividend? It's about the importance of preserving the capital base for the future and for future investments. We do have that responsibility. So in concluding the debate, Mr. Chair, I thoroughly recommend to the public of Hawke's Bay that they join this council in funding the urgent work that needs to be funded.
Thank you. So we are moving 1, 2, 4, 5 and 6. We're mover and seconder for that. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Unanimous. So we're going to take number 3, which is actually the increase, and move that secondly. Mover, seconder. Do you want to talk to that? Or we've already talked? We've already talked. Okay. So, all those in favour? Aye. Against? Do you wish your vote recorded? Division? We don't have to redo that. We've got we have a division. Record those divisions. It is passed. Thank you. Item 10, Heritonga Urban Development